So let's go to the export and import and export with past and service.
Export of goods with its grammatical variations and cognate expressions means taking out of India to a place outside India.
Full stop. A very simple and a restrictive definition. The entire concept of deemed export is here. As of today, I might be selling directly to an outside company. I take the goods out, clearly an export, no problem. Manufacturer directly sells to the buyer and export. A trader sells to the buyer and export. But as of today, if there's a trader, he can buy from a manufacturer without duties. There is a concept of H form under the sales tax regime. There is a concept of ARE1 and CT1 forms under the excise regime. And therefore, if a trader knows that he is going to export, that penultimate transaction also is eligible for an exemption. That goes away because it would not satisfy this definition of export imports. It means taking of goods out of India to a place outside India. So that second penultimate leg becomes taxable. GST would be payable. Of course, there would be a refund mechanism for the trader, but that's an important working capital blockage which one person will have to take into account when one looks at exports. Am I clear on this?
The SEZ contract will follow.
SEZ supplies to SEZ's initial working draft, they had said that supplies to SEZs will be zero rated, but the current draft law doesn't have anything like that. So, of course, STPs and EOUs, they have always said it will be taxed. That has been the position all throughout. So, EOUs, STPs clearly taxed. SEZs, initially the policy document was to say that supplies to SEZs will be zero rated. But it has not found place in the current law. So they will have to somewhere, they are representing, SEZs are representing, and perhaps we might see an amendment for SEZ. As of now, there is nothing. As of now, it's a problem. EOUs, STPs is clearly a problem. There's no way to, it's a policy call they have taken at some stage. See, the whole thought process is GST has to work without documents. And that's one thing which they are very clear. We don't want documents, we don't want M form, C form, E1 form, we don't want any forms. And the moment they do away with the forms, it automatically means that there is a tax. All these forms are made to avoid a tax. The moment you do away with all these forms and paperwork, it means that there is a tax. And they are saying, you pay tax and claim refund. Not knowing that what's happening at the ground level. Refund takes its own time and it is its own cost. But the drafters of the law don't realize this. They say, you pay tax and every quarter we give you a refund. Come back and take a refund. So that's the broad process. Yes.
Currently, import and export.
Direct transaction abroad, transshipment will not be taxed.
Out of purview of GST.
Out of purview of GST.
So concept of deemed export is no longer there. And you are saying
Yeah.
100% EOU, that is not amount.
Deemed export concept has gone up. Interestingly, the law doesn't provide for an exemption for deemed exports, but the input tax credit mechanism, there is a concept of refunds for deemed exports. So there's again some ironing out which is required. Because that again they copy pasted from the refund provisions, and so the refund mechanism, they say that export includes deemed exports. But the zero rating provisions don't include deemed exports. So one of them will have to change. There are many such small changes which are required in the draft at various places. Yes.
Initially, there will be no form. Planning to later on a government.
So that's the handle which the state government will always have, and that's what is scary. Like I cannot say with confidence that they will not bring forms at all in the future, because the state governments have an authority to change the law. As of now, definitely it will not happen. So even rates, initially you will have a 20% rate. Let's say all the 30 states will agree on 20% rate. But I cannot say with surety that 5 years down the line, some state will not say 20 ka badle 12 kar do. So that is a concern which is there. Export of services.
The supply of any service shall be treated as export of service when the supplier of service is located in India, the recipient of service is located outside India, the place of supply of service is outside India, payment for such service has been received by the supplier of service in convertible foreign exchange, and the supplier of service and recipient of service are not merely establishment of a distinct person. Explanation: for the purpose of the clause E, an establishment of a person in India and any of his other establishment outside India shall be treated as establishment of distinct persons.
So this is more or less similar to our current matrix of export of service. And again, when you go to this explanation, it revalidates my thought process to say branch transfers will not be taxed. Here you have a very specific explanation deeming a foreign branch and an Indian branch to be distinct persons. And that we are told is only for the purpose of clause E, which is this definition. So if you have two branches within the country, this in fact validates my thought process to say that two branches within the same country should not be treated as distinct persons. So that's what, otherwise I think more or less this definition is similar to the current matrix which we have. It would become export, but not because of this definition, but because we have subsequent place of supply rules. Indenting agent would clearly be an export in the future.
So, going by this definition, says supplier of service and recipient of service are not merely establishment of a distinct person. Like if they are, so they are separate entities, legal entities.
Yeah, so if let's say you have a Bombay branch and a Dubai branch, and you receive money from the Dubai branch, you cannot claim the export of service bill. That's what it
Yeah,
is.
so then there is a GST applicable in that way.
No.
Does it
So that is a question which we are raising in the next slide. And we'll touch upon that when we go into that. Because it's a complicated game. We are seeing that the either E or D, either of those two cases will have the same problem. Let's say I render a service to a Nepal person, and it's easy to understand that. Let's say I am a contractor, I undertake a contract for lift installation in Nepal. I will receive money in Indian currency. My goods and services are all delivered in Nepal. My A, B, C, E conditions are satisfied. D is not satisfied. What happens? Does it become an interstate or an intrastate supply? Go back to our first slides. Is it an interstate? What is interstate? Interstate is location of supplier and the place of supply is in different states. What location of supplier is Bombay? Place of supply is what? Is it a state of India? So is it interstate? Is it intrastate? So where will it fit? It's not export also. Because you are not received money in convertible foreign exchange.
But there are cases to say that even consideration in rupees is convertible.
Yeah, not going into that debate. Let's say it's clearly an Indian rupee transaction. So, yes, one is to say that it's a deemed foreign currency and so D is satisfied and therefore it's an export. But you are not going into that argument of deemed currency. Assuming that you agree that D is not satisfied. Then where will you fit? And that's where even your answer to your E not satisfied will come. So will you say inter or intra? I am agreeing that it's not export. But now tell me whether it's inter or intra.
Intra.
Where is the place of supply? Intra means place of supply has to be Maharashtra. So it's not Maharashtra.
The recipient is liable to pay Maharashtra.
No, recipient is located in Nepal. Actual activity happens also in Nepal. So today we have three different baskets in service tax. One is export, which entitles me for credits and also paying tax, zero tax. You have domestic where you pay tax and claim credits, and then you have non-exports in between wherein you still don't pay a tax, but you are not entitled for credit. So my belief would be that this would be a similar type of a intermediary transaction where you would still not end up paying CGST, IGST or SGST. But what will happen is this will not classify as your eligible outward supply. It will not eligible you to make you eligible for a zero rating, and therefore if there is a corresponding input credit, maybe there will be a restriction on that input credit. That's all. But you will not end up paying a tax. Both the laws are similar credit rules. Proportionate in both of them. So that is the only restraint which will come. Just because you don't satisfy these conditions will not automatically make you liable to pay the tax. For creating a liability to pay the tax, this clause number C is the most important one. If you don't satisfy C, then you are stuck. Place of supply is outside India. If you don't satisfy that, if your place of supply becomes somewhere in India, then you will go into IGST or SGST. But if your place of supply is not in India, you don't have to worry about output tax. At the most, you might need to worry about the input tax credit. That is the proposition which I would make.
Any similarity for B?
No, as of now, no. Maybe through rules, if they bring something, it's another.
So what is the situation of indemnity and providing service to non-listed company?
One line answer, it would be exempted, but we have detailed rules which we will go in a few minutes. One line answer, exempted. Okay, so we talked about this aspect. So goods, we talked about all of these, deemed exports, supplies to EU, all of these we talked. Let's go to import of goods.
Import of goods with its grammatical variations and cognate expressions means bringing into India from a place outside India.
Simple definition, again, direct imports will be treated as an import of goods. Again, the IGST becoming a part of the CVD chain, of the basic custom duty chain. Let's go to import of service.
The supply of any service shall be treated as an import of service if the supplier of service is located outside India, the recipient of service is located in India, the place of supply of service is in India, and the supplier of service and the recipient of service are not merely establishments of a distinct person. Explanation 1. An establishment of a person in India and any of his other establishment outside India shall be treated as establishments of distinct persons. Explanation 2. A person carrying on a business through a branch or agency or representation office in any territory shall be treated as having an establishment in that territory.
Beautiful. So we have now a clear definition of import of service. Again, a mirror image of export of service, and that's good. Because as of now, we have a huge debate on remittances made to foreign branches. Because the definition of service defines foreign branch to be a separate establishment, and when you make a remittance, the department tries to draw a dotted line and say that the remittance which you make is towards some service given by the branch to the head office. Luckily, we now have this clause D, which makes things very simple. It says that just because you make a remittance to the foreign branch for its survival, it will not be treated as a payment made towards a supply done by the foreign entity. If there is just an interstate flow of currency between branches, it will not be treated as an import, and therefore there will not be any RCM. We already have a decision in Tech Mahindra and Infosys case in the service tax regime, when a similar view is taken by the tribunal, but it's in the absence of this section. Now with this section being there, it's much more safer and easier, and I think it's the step in the right direction. So summarizing this, import of goods will be a part of the CVD chain. Sale in the course of import and export high seas is a big concern. So there's no exemption. As of today, there's an exemption under the CST Act, wherein high sea sales is exempted and sale occasioning import of goods is exempted. Moving forward, there's no such exemption. Import of goods is very limitedly defined. It is defined to mean bringing the goods from outside the country to India. And therefore, you will end up in a situation where there will be an IGST on high seas sale and sea coin sale in the course of import. Now, somebody will say it's fine, so what? But the only concern is, because in both these cases, it's not in CCOI case, but in high seas case, it's the end customer who clears the goods from customs. At the time of clearance from customs, the customs authority will demand an IGST, and at the same time, the Indian supplier will also demand IGST. So there is a double IGST whammy on a high seas transaction. I hope I'm clear. So this is a situation where there is a supplier in India who is selling high seas to a customer in India, and he had bought it from a manufacturer outside India. So when the goods come to India, the bill of entry is filed by the Indian customer. So when he files the Indian customer files the bill of entry along with the basic custom duty, he will have to pay IGST in normal course. The customs department will expect it. The invoice to this customer comes from an Indian supplier, and this Indian supplier, who till today used to claim a high seas exemption, will no longer be eligible for the high seas exemption. So he will also in his invoice charge an IGST. Both those IGST will be available as credit, but it's Like you will have 40 credit and 20 output. So that's where the mismatch is. So that's what he is doing when he files a customs documentation. No, in HiSys it is this guy who does it. In HiSys, this person does the documentation.
Buyer does.
Buyer does the documentation. He is not paying on import, but he's raising a invoice. He is an Indian supplier. He raises an invoice to an Indian customer. Currently, this is exempt. Moving forward, isn't this a supply?
So,
This transaction is a supply, na? Because in his P&L, this will sit as his sales, and it is an Indian sales.
So there will be a situation of SED refund kind of stuff.
SAD is subsuming in IGST, so SAD refund concept is going away.
Similar kind of can be implemented here.
How will it get implemented, we don't know. Of course, many people have talked in the industry after this came up as an issue, and most of them said that practically we were doing HiSys to save on the VAT, and if anyway there's no GST credits are there and things are going to be that way, we'll move from HiSys model to something else, or a normal import transaction, or let him only import and then have the chain flow through. So here, if he imports and supplies, there's only one GST because there's a credit available. But here there are two GSTs coming into place. So maybe the entire HiSys model will get either closed or redundant.
whether this will be different from supply from bonded fuel or from
Same. All those variations would somewhere one will have to relook at all those models.
else the person who buying will get two credits to claim.
But which is a pain because see, what happens is at the first stage you have 40 rupees going out. Credits are there, but it is only when you are able to utilize it. Refunds are available only for exports and inverted rate structure. No other case you can get the money back from the government. Everywhere else it's only a carry forward thing. And these are not examples of exports or inverted rate structure. So refund is ruled out. Now if you are only an importer doing this type of activity, you will have a huge input credit block. What will you do with that?
So this will become even more complicated with separate registration.
Yes. Even if you look at a unidirectional, let's say you are just an importer in Bombay, and you have two GSTs in input side and only one GST on output side, how are you going to marry those two things? And you just keep on sending checks outside, that's it. So it's a working capital issue for me. Same. All those concepts, bonded warehouse sales, CCOI, HiSys, all of them will actually present a complication now. Earlier they were advantageous. Now in fact they will become disadvantageous as compared to the normal model. If it's a normal model, there's no problem here. See, if that foreigner directly sells and this guy clears and then he sells to you, there's no problem. Life is simple. He will pay the GST in the customs, claim the credit, and he will charge you GST. So there's no cash flow issue. But because you do this exercise, it becomes disadvantageous. Yeah. So that was import and export. Now we go to domestic transactions, and of course to some extent understanding import export also this will be important is the place of supply.